Hello, and welcome back to this episode of This Healthy Life podcast. I'm so excited for my guest today. I have Erin Kelly. You might know her as the Celiac Space on Instagram, and she is a registered dietitian, and she has a virtual practice that she's working with people with celiac disease. And we're here today to talk about such an important topic. There is so much misinformation and so many kind of like myths out there on what is safe for celiacs, what's not. And so many of the people that are kind of putting this out there aren't even familiar with celiac disease. And so I think it's so important to kind of break down a lot of these different myths, talk about what the truth is, and we have an expert here to tell us what is going on with each of these topics. So Erin, welcome. So excited for today.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to just kind of start with a little bit of an intro. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this space and working with people with celiac disease.
Yeah, so I'm Erin. I am a registered dietitian, and I originally started in the sports medicine space. I've had celiac for like over 12 years, and it is just something I never really wanted to focus on as a dietitian. So my other passion is like working with athletes and being an athlete myself. So I really did that for kind of the beginning of my nutrition career. And one day I stumbled upon a Facebook group with people talking about celiac disease, and there was so much misinformation. And I was like, wow, I guess I took for granted how much I know for myself. But the misinformation was insane. And I was like, let me start helping these people. And the more I dove into it, the more I was like, these people need more help. So kind of organically, my career took a turn, and I created the Celiac Space, which is where we really work with people with celiac disease, gut health disorders, and have kind of made a lot of change in this community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, there's just so much misinformation and there's not really any good resources either. You
Mm-mm.
go to your doctor, you have all these symptoms and issues, you finally get diagnosed with celiac
Yeah.
disease, and the only thing they can give you and tell you is go gluten-free, everything will
Yeah.
get better. But it's like, it's not that easy, right? I mean, there's like
No.
hidden gluten in everything. You're constantly navigating like how to stay safe and, all these different things. And so there's not really like a good resource to go
No.
to get accurate information. And your doctor certainly isn't going to give you kind of the details of it. So I'm
No.
glad
And
we're going to
they
deep
get so
dive.
frustrated when the doctor doesn't give them information. The typical answer, like you said, is you have celiac, go gluten free, which they're like, shouldn't the doctor give me more? And probably they should. That would be best practice, but insurance is not going to cover them their time to sit there and explain to you. The doctor has no training in nutrition. They've taken no nutrition courses. They don't really know what gluten is themselves, and there is no medication to fix celiac, so there is no money in it for insurance companies. So the best that they can do is say gluten free, and that's why most people find us, and in some cases find misinformation online and follow that too. So
Yep. Absolutely. All right.
yeah,
So let's get into it. Let's start
let's do
breaking
it.
down some of these myths that are perpetrating the internet
Yeah.
and need to be debunked. So the first one that I hear so much is like, if you don't have symptoms, you don't need to follow a strict gluten-free diet. It means you're not that sensitive and, you
Yeah.
can dabble in it here and there. So what's the truth behind this one?
Yeah. So the truth is, if you have celiac disease, it doesn't matter if you have symptoms or not. There's many people that are asymptomatic. You need to follow a gluten-free diet just like anybody else would with celiac. On the flip side, if you are a regular person that doesn't have celiac disease and you have no symptoms to gluten, then maybe you can eat it, right? So for celiac, regardless of symptoms, absolutely not ever. No cheating, no cross contact. Somebody without celiac, that might be a little bit of a different answer depending on severity.
Absolutely. And then another one that I hear all the time too is if you don't have digestive issues, you probably are not sensitive to gluten. But I
Yeah.
myself get no digestive issues from gluten. It's all neurological issues for me.
Yep.
And so if you can kind of break down what these different kind of symptom sets that people can be looking for if they are celiac or sensitive to gluten.
Yeah. So there's over 200. I've heard them all. Textbook celiac is like failure to thrive, constipation, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Those are probably the most common, but there's a lot of other factors, right? So things like excessive weight gain, hormonal issues, headaches, joint pain, neurological issues. In kids, it's a lot of times like acting out. It might be because they have a stomach pain or joint pain and they just can't communicate it. Migraines, nutrient deficiencies, all of those are other common symptoms. Yeah, there's a handful of them. Some of them are primary, related specifically to gluten. More of those are like digestive issues, but there's a lot of secondary ones. Sometimes neurological things come up as a byproduct of the gluten causing damage to your intestines where it can't absorb nutrients, and then you get things. So for example, if your body can't absorb B12 because celiac has been damaging your intestines, you're going to get tingly hands and fingers because of neurological damage. So
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then another one that I hear a lot about is diagnosis, right? I did a
Hmm.
blood test. My blood test says I'm not sensitive to gluten, so I can
Yeah.
eat it again. So
Yeah.
obviously the gold standard for being diagnosed with celiac disease is to do an endoscopy. Also make sure you have the gene as well. So can you break down some of the misinformation around testing and diagnosis?
Yes. So gold standard is the endoscopy. However, in order to have the endoscopy, you have to be eating gluten. Some people aren't able to do that. Um, Blood work, it really depends on what actual labs you got. So you want to make sure your doctor is taking the correct labs. A food sensitivity blood work is not the same as celiac. There's other lab works that might be ran that aren't appropriate. Total TTG, IgA, total IgA, TTG, IgA are going to be the most important. EMA is another blood work that you can do. Endoscopy is the gold standard. All of those you have to be eating gluten. Genetic test is another one. If you have the celiac gene, does not mean you have celiac, but it means you have the potential to develop it. There's a very, very small percentage of people that have celiac, both through endoscopy and genetic testing, or endoscopy and blood testing, but they don't have the gene. We don't know all the genes that map for celiac disease. We don't know the whole genetic code. So there is a small chance of people that have that gene that we don't necessarily know about, but they do have celiac. That's not very common, but it is possible. So what I tell people is there's kind of 5 things to keep in mind when you are looking to get diagnosed or considering, do I have celiac or not? Blood work, endoscopy, family history, genetics, and symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go gluten-free, does it help or not?
Absolutely. Okay. And then the next one really makes my blood boil, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that does for you too. But I am so sick of hearing people say that, oh, you can go to Europe and you can eat the wheat
Mm,
there. Like you can go to
yeah.
Italy and eat the pasta there and you can eat gluten. And, I always try to remind people that Italy actually has one of the highest incidences of celiac disease in the world. And they're
Yep.
so aware of it, so conscious of it.
Yep.
And so if people in Italy could eat the gluten there, why do they have celiac disease? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. So I think people kind of use this as a freak wild card to go
Uh-huh.
to Italy, be on vacation, and cheat. But this is doing such
Yeah.
extreme damage to your intestine. So, what's the truth behind this one? I mean, I think we already have kind of dialed
Yeah,
in the
I think
answer,
we've
but
I think we've said it.
I'm gonna let you debunk this one.
Yeah, I'll debunk it. No, you can, if you have celiac, you cannot eat wheat, gluten, any of that kind of stuff in Italy. Like you said, the example of Italians, like they would have fixed it by now if they could. I'm sure there's no population more that wants to be eating gluten. I will say this probably started, my guess is people that have gluten sensitivity, maybe they go to Europe and they can eat gluten just fine. Very different than celiac. But as we know, when you're on vacation, stress is lower, you're walking more, you might not be eating the same type of quantities. Their quality in Europe is different. It is better. So there is other factors that could apply to somebody with a gluten sensitivity, but does not apply to somebody with celiac. So again, we're talking about 2 completely different demographics, different mechanism of action, those kind of things.
And I think that was a good time to maybe kind of break down what those differences are, right? So
Yeah.
when someone's just say gluten sensitive versus someone with celiac disease, what are kind of the hallmark differences between the two conditions?
Yeah. So celiac, we can diagnose it, right? Like I mentioned, kind of those 5 things. There is an autoimmune reaction. So any amount of gluten being ingested by the body is going to cause an autoimmune response. Your body is going to attack itself. It does not go away. You cannot improve it. There's nothing to be done besides following gluten-free diet. Of course, focusing on other aspects of health, making sure your gut health is appropriate, exercise, eating well. Those things are important too. Somebody with gluten sensitivity could be a handful of things. Typically, it's going to be more GI symptoms if they're eating gluten foods. They're going to have symptoms, but it isn't something that you can like really diagnose, right? It's more from an elimination diet, those kind of things that you determine it's not celiac, but I still don't feel great on it. Therefore, it's a gluten sensitivity.
And how prevalent is gluten sensitivity versus celiac disease?
Um, that's a
Do
good
you know any
question.
stats on that? I know celiac disease is
Yeah.
about 3% of the population.
Yep.
I've heard some things that gluten sensitivity could be as high as like 30% of the population,
Yeah.
people that are
I've heard
just
all
sensitive to
numbers.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I've
I'm
heard
not quite
all
sure what
numbers.
the accurate stats are, but that's the last I remember seeing somewhere.
Yeah. For celiac, I've heard anywhere between 1% and 3% of the population. It somewhat depends on where it is. Like Italy has much higher prevalence because they do more testing. There's more awareness of it. That number is increasing because there's more awareness, there's more testing than it was maybe 20 years ago. Gluten sensitivity, I feel like it's trending now, so it's probably falsely higher than it actually is. It somewhat depends.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we don't have enough
I feel
data.
like we need to someday, hopefully, there'll be a test to see if you're actually just sensitive to gluten without actually being celiac, because I think that would really help guide a lot of people and kind of figure out what's going on for
Yeah.
them as well.
And I think a lot of times too, it's they have other health issues, right? Like,
Yep.
and they're eating maybe high processed food that is high in gluten. And so that's what's causing symptoms. And so going gluten free, maybe they naturally clean up their diet a little bit more. And then they're like, I feel so
Mm-hmm.
much better. It's a gluten sensitivity. When could it have been a host of other, more functional things?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And the next one is another one that I hear all the time that makes me so crazy too. It's
Yeah.
that celiacs can eat sourdough because it's been fermented and the gluten is broken down.
I
Your face
wish.
says it all on this one.
Yeah. I wish. Nope. It's still wheat. The fermentation doesn't do anything. Um, Interestingly, like what is being fermented is the starch part of the grain. Gluten is the protein part, so it's not even breaking down the right part. The gluten is still very much there. Um, so no, they do make gluten-free sourdough, which is sourdough made of gluten-free grain. So not to be confused, there is truly gluten-free sourdough, but a standard sourdough made from wheat, spelt, any of those things would not be celiac safe.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad we clarified
Hard no.
that.
Hard no.
And I didn't know that it was the starch that gets broken down. So yeah, it's not even breaking down any of the proteins in the product
Yeah.
anyway. So you might feel better because you're not getting so much starch, but you're still getting all that gluten. So
Yes.
and so someone with, say, gluten sensitivity could possibly eat sourdough,
They
right?
could potentially,
Maybe
yeah.
they're more sensitive to the starch or something like that, and that's why they feel better eating that. So, okay, just want to make
Yeah.
sure that that's clear too. So,
Yeah.
okay. And then the next one is ancient grains. Everyone's like, these are grown differently. They're more like the old spelt and Ian corn wheat and things like that.
Yeah.
Those are also just going to have as much gluten, maybe a little bit less gluten, but you're still, as a celiac, not able to consume any gluten at all. So what's kind of the truth behind these ancient grains that everyone's saying that is safe for celiac sometimes?
Yeah, no, if it's still any form of wheat, it's not going to be safe, right? There's
Yep.
other ancient grains like quinoa that are gluten free. So it doesn't really matter what label they want to put on them. I think ancient grain is a nice slogan like paleo or, those kind of things. It sounds good. It's good for marketing. It sounds like it would be healthier. In a lot of cases, they probably are because they more mean a whole grain. It's less processed, but that has nothing to do with it being gluten free.
Absolutely. And then there's one more food group that feel like gets kind of lumped into these. It's safe because it's fermented, and that's soy sauce. So a lot of people have
Uh,
no idea that soy sauce actually even has gluten. It's actually made with wheat, and people
yes.
think that because it's fermented, it's breaking down the wheat and it's safe for celiacs. When in fact, if you're celiac, you should actually be using tamari, which is completely wheat free. So can you break down what's going on with soy sauce and how that's getting you misinformed out there?
Yeah, I think also people get confused thinking because soy sauce is not gluten free, that soy is not gluten free. The reason soy sauce is not gluten free is because there's soy and wheat in it. The actual soy product, like soybeans, is gluten free. The problem with soy sauce, at least traditionally, it's soy and wheat together. So in order for soy sauce to be gluten free, it needs to be the tamari version, which is just soy,
Soy.
no wheat added.
Yeah.
Yeah. But soy
And
itself
then
is gluten free, which is another like weird one that people get tripped up about because soy sauce is not gluten free.
yeah, absolutely. And then is this a similar instance when kind of like the sourdough? Is it what protein is getting fermented and broken down in the soy sauce? I mean, obviously it's not going to be the wheat protein or the gluten, right? So what is it in that fermentation process that is breaking down that people could get confused about?
It would be similar to soy sauce, or sorry, it'd be similar to sourdough. It's a little bit different because I'm not sure the mechanisms of the creation of soy sauce. It might be that
Mm-hmm.
they ferment just the soy and then they add the wheat after. I don't even know if wheat is being
Mm,
fermented in soy sauce.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
either. So
Yeah.
something to look into.
Haven't ever made it myself. I won't be
Me
making it, to
neither.
be honest. I'll be buying tamari. So, yeah.
Exactly. And I actually kind of like tamari a little bit better. It's a little saltier. It
Tamari, coconut
fits my,
aminos.
yep.
Yeah,
So many good
just
alternatives nowadays.
totally.
So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then another one that I hear all the time, and I think this one kind of ties in a little bit to the, oh, this is why you can eat wheat in Europe, but people say it's not gluten, it's glyphosate.
Mm.
And this one just makes my blood boil too, because I'm just like, you know what? Everything we're eating here has glyphosate. So if that were the
Yeah.
case, I would be reacting to everything I eat, even if I'm buying organic things.
Hmm.
There's studies that have shown that there's glyphosate, there's pesticides on all that, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah.
So, maybe in Europe, sure, there's hopefully a little bit less use of glyphosate and pesticides, but here, like, everything we're eating has it. So it's why is it that I'm just reacting to gluten? So this
Yeah.
one just makes no sense to me either. But let's go ahead and break this one down and tell the truth on
Pivot.
this one.
Yeah, again, a total like misunderstanding. I think people hear one thing, they hear a clip, and then they run with it, and they don't have an
Mhm.
understanding of like what glyphosate even is, what
Yeah.
gluten even is. They're like, oh, that kind of sound familiar, so maybe it's one, not the other.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, even gluten-free foods are sprayed with glyphosate, right? One of the most
Yep.
common ones is oats, right? So oat products are gluten-free as long as they're grown properly, but
Mhm.
there's a ton of glyphosate on them, right? There's also
Mhm.
a ton of other gluten-free products depending on what you're getting. Of course, I would say probably more gluten-free products are going to be organic and might have better manufacturing processes that don't have the glyphosate. But even then, like you said, no matter how hard you try, they're going to still be on there.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
no, they're two completely different things.
Yep. And so if people think that glyphosate is their issue, which I think they're eating on everything, right? How
Yeah.
how are they going to be able to differentiate that between their gluten symptoms and say a symptom that could be caused from eating processed food or food that maybe not as organic?
Yeah. I would answer it like this. I would say if you are eating gluten free, right, and I'm truly eating gluten free, if I'm celiac, I'm avoiding cross contact, if I have gluten sensitivity, I'm not cheating, or like I'm truly gluten free. If you're still having symptoms, we need to look at something else. Could we look at glyphosate? Sure, right? That's not one of the top 20 things I would look at as a practitioner, right? Because it is on everything. If that is the case, what are you going to do about it, right? We got to look at other factors. Is it gut health? Is it SIBO? Is it H. pylori? Is it hormonal imbalances? Is it liver? Is it all these millions of other things it could be? Glyphosate as a provider is not one of my top thoughts. So if that's what you think it is, it's probably because your algorithm is feeding you some stuff that is telling you that's the case. But let me address some other factors for you.
Yeah, I know those things like every now and then they just go viral. And I know in like the celiac disease community, we're just
Yeah,
like, no, we're like, put a stop to this. Like, this is
yeah,
not true. And it's just harming people with celiac disease even more,
yeah. It is.
unfortunately. So, all right, you brought up oats. So that's a perfect segue into talking
Yep.
about oats. So people think that oats are gluten free because technically they don't have gluten, but there's a
Yep.
massive issue with cross contamination the way oats are grown. So, can you
Yeah.
break down what's going on with oats and why oats are not always gluten free?
Yes. So oats, from like a chemical standpoint, they do not contain the gluten protein. So they are gluten free. They are safe for somebody with celiac disease. Asterisk, there's a small percentage of people that don't tolerate oats, both people with celiac and without celiac, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just some people don't tolerate oats very well, just like some people don't tolerate quinoa or whatever other food. So
Mm-hmm.
that is something to kind of keep in mind. That is not all celiacs. Most celiacs can eat oats no problem. But in order for them to be celiac safe, they need to meet two criteria in terms of labeling, and I'll get in a little bit further. But in order for an oat product to be celiac safe, it either needs to be certified gluten free, meaning it has the right procedures in place and testing to be less than 10% parts per million. Certified gluten free is like gold standard for anything celiac safe. Or it needs to state on the package gluten free oats. And that tells us that the manufacturer has grown them properly, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they're typically oats are grown in wheat fields. So there's a lot of cross contact. They're grown in wheat fields. They're in the same manufacturing plants. They're using the same equipment to sort the oats and sort the wheat.
Mm-hmm.
They're driven in the same trucks, all of those things. So in
Mm-hmm.
order to have a final product that hasn't been crazily interacted and cross contacted with wheat, it does need to be like have extra precautions in place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes oats not always gluten free.
Yeah, and then I want to add that there's like kind of like a new standard too, right? Like the purity protocol that's kind of taking things to the next level and making sure that oats really are truly celiac safe. Because I know in the past few years there's been a lot of things with like I think even Trader Joe's oats potentially that they were gluten free, but after testing they were showing that they were actually not gluten free. So
Yeah.
oats are always kind of a risky food to
Yeah.
consume if you're celiac as well. And definitely not something you should be eating right away if you just get diagnosed. Definitely recommend taking them out
Yeah.
for a while and then adding them
Yep.
in once you've kind of healed and then see how you feel with that, right?
Yeah, and it depends. Some individuals can have it right away, but if there is a concern, oats are always the first thing that we pull and
Mm-hmm.
allow for more time. It very much depends on like the product and manufacturing lines and that kind of stuff. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
there's always accidents. The biggest one that everyone always like freaks out about is Cheerios. Cheerios, Lucky Charms, not gluten free, not celiac safe, or they are gluten free, not celiac safe,
Mm-hmm.
even though they're sponsored by the Celiac Foundation, which is a problem for another
Yep.
time. Um, but the reason those are not celiac safe is they use oats, so they are gluten free, but they don't have the right manufacturing. Cross contact is a big deal. All those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not gluten-free oats. Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
And then what are your thoughts on all these like kind of new products that are gluten removed? So we see this in
Mm.
like gluten removed beers, things like that. Are those safe for people with celiac disease, or is this something that's going to be geared more towards people that just have a gluten sensitivity and see if they can actually tolerate that?
Yeah, gluten sensitivity for sure, not celiac safe. Gluten free or gluten removed beers is probably the most common example. What that is that they're making beer from gluten containing grains and then they're pulling the gluten from it. With alcohol specifically, we don't have proper testing to really test that final product and make sure that it's the amount of gluten in there is safe for somebody with celiac. The amount of gluten in any product is never going to be zero. Obviously, with like an apple and those kind of things, yes, but we don't live in a gluten-free bubble. There's always a chance that products are going to have some gluten. So um, with alcohol specifically, it's hard for us to test. So therefore, gluten-removed beers are not safe. There are other products like gluten-free wheat starch where they can be celiac safe if, again, they have proper testing and proper manufacturing in place. Of wheat starch, gluten is the protein, like we talked about. The starch part is the carbohydrate component. So they have technology that removes the protein from it, that removes the gluten and just leaves the starch. Therefore, that can be safe, again, with proper testing.
Hmm. Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. There's
Hmm.
like I keep seeing wheat starch in a lot of
Yeah, yeah,
gluten-free
yeah.
products now, particularly like flours and baked goods and things like that. And I'm like, I've been hesitant to try it because I'm just like anything that says wheat, I'm like,
I know it's
ah,
scary.
like I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
wheat makes me so miserable. Like, why would I eat
Totally.
any component of wheat? And then I'm like, do you really trust that they've gotten every little bit of gluten out of there? Or are all these products always going to be like, 5, 10 parts per million of gluten? Like you don't really know, right? Like you mentioned, I think proper testing is definitely important on that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I've
And
I
to,
personally have steered clear of it, but
I
I
know,
wanted to talk to you and see what your thoughts are on
yeah.
like, is wheat starch actually safe for celiacs?
It's a mental trip for sure.
Yeah.
Like I think if you're anxious about eating that product and you eat it in an anxious state, you're probably not going to feel great, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you're like the anxiety can cause symptoms alone, so that's something to be mindful of. Um, like with the oats, you want to make sure that the product, if it has wheat starch in it, is certified gluten free or clearly states gluten free wheat starch. And you should be able to look on that company website and learn more about it, right? So um, not Bob's Red Mills. King Arthur is a brand that makes flour with wheat starch. If you look on the website, they'll break you down. Like they'll explain it all to you. If it's a company where they're like, we just use this, and they're not going to tell you about any of their processes in place, they probably aren't doing a good enough job. Like they don't care enough to explain it to you. I don't know if I would like trust that. That's not a hard, fast rule, but that's kind of something to keep in mind. The other thing is if you have a wheat allergy or a wheat sensitivity, you can't have that product. It still has wheat in it, right? The gluten is removed, but the wheat is still there. So it kind of depends on the reason you're gluten free. There are some people that are gluten free for a wheat allergy because that's kind of easier.
Yep.
And so in that case, wheat starch would not be safe.
Gotcha. And then how common is it for someone to have celiac disease and also be sensitive to wheat? Does it overlap pretty much that you should just be avoiding all wheat products, or are most celiacs able to consume wheat, just not the gluten component of wheat?
Most celiacs are able to consume wheat if it's like wheat starch, right, where the gluten's been
Yep.
removed,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Which is a very new thing. I would say within the
Yeah.
last like 2 or 3 years,
Yep.
even there's been those products on the market. So I think with time we'll be able to tell. Most people, if they have celiac, they're not able to test wheat because it's under
Mm-hmm.
the category of gluten.
Yep.
Um, so that's like a little bit hard to say or to test. Really, you would only know if you maybe had a gluten allergy first as a kid and then you develop
Mm-hmm.
celiac or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll see what happens with the wheat starch. I'm going to
Yeah.
let everyone else be the guinea pigs
TBD.
on this,
Yeah.
guinea pigs on this first and see how it goes, and then maybe I'll dabble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to break down some myths about cross contact too. So as a
Yeah.
celiac, you have to be so mindful of like all the surfaces your food is prepared on, like people's gloves, like cutting boards, utensils, like can't cook pasta in the same water as like gluten pasta, like so many things that you have to like ask questions about, especially when you go out to eat. And so let's break down some of the myths around that. So sometimes, food comes out and it has a piece of bread on the side, or it has a couple croutons on the salad, and people think that you can just pick that off and eat it, or just move the bread off to the side and still
Mhm.
eat your food. But what's the truth with this?
The truth is that's a hard no. While there are celiacs that do it, right? That's not what I would recommend at all. That is not safe. That is not the right protocol. So if you see someone with celiac doing it, That's how they want to manage their health journey, but that is not recommended. That is definitely
Mm-hmm.
too much gluten exposure. It
Mm-hmm.
also tells me if a restaurant comes out and I've placed my order and I've made it clear. Personally, I usually say like, make sure it's gluten free. I have a celiac allergy, so no gluten at all. If
Mm-hmm.
it comes out with bread on it or with croutons, it's clear there was a miscommunication.
Yep.
So not only am I concerned about the croutons on it, I'm concerned about they didn't understand the other things that I mentioned to them. So that's a red flag.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, I was at a restaurant once, try to make it very clear, like, hey, I'm celiac, I have a gluten allergy. I always just say gluten allergy, even though it's
Yeah,
not
it's
technically
easy.
that, but like sometimes that's just easier for restaurants to understand, right? And
Yeah.
so, and I like made it super clear. I was like, bread cannot touch my food, like the croutons cannot touch my food. It has to be tossed in like a separate bowl. Comes out with croutons on it. And I was like, sent it back, and they brought it back with the croutons removed. And so you really have to kind of become like a detective, right? Like almost have
Yeah.
like a magnifying glass. Like I looked on there, I'm like, there's like a bunch of little crumbs. And I was like, called the manager over. I was like, hey, you guys didn't remake this salad. I'm going to get
Yeah.
sick. Like you can't do
Yeah.
this. So once I involved the manager and kind of like shared with them, like they took it more seriously. So I felt comfortable eating, and I ended up
Yeah.
just getting a completely different salad because I didn't trust them at that point very much.
Yeah.
But you really have to advocate for yourself, know what is safe for you and what isn't, and then kind of like just be a detective. Like when your food comes
For
out, I'm
sure.
like literally always just kind of inspecting it and like making sure I don't see any like weird crumbs or anything
Uh-huh.
fried and
It's
things
always
like
like
that.
brown sauce for me, like
Yep.
soy, typical soy sauce,
Yep.
those kind of things. I also like think understanding how food is prepared. A lot of people just don't know what a fried food is. Like they don't know that Brussels sprouts as an appetizer is typically fried. So understanding how things are cooked and prepared is really helpful, and that takes one, cooking for yourself, being in the kitchen, asking questions, those kind of things. I will say one little hack for the salad issue, because that's a big one that people say like, oh, my food came out with bread or my whatever. Always get dressing on the side. So if your food comes out with croutons on it, you then put the dressing on the salad. And
Mm-hmm.
if it comes back out with dressing on it, they didn't remake your salad because it's no
That's a
longer
good
on the
one.
side, it's dressed.
Yep. Yep.
So like you kind of mess with your own food a little bit so that you can
Yeah.
really tell what happened.
Yeah.
Same thing if you get a cheeseburger and they have the bun on there, you put ketchup on that burger.
Mm-hmm.
They can't just pull off the bun. There's ketchup on it now.
Yep. I always try to kind of change my food, like
You
in
change the
traveling,
order.
yeah, and like or just like do something to the food so you know that they remade it, right? Like and
Mm,
traveling in other countries, like I feel like they understand it less, so it's even harder. Like we were recently in Colombia and we ordered something and it came out with I forget what it was, something fried, and I was just like, hey, like I told you I can't eat anything fried,
yeah.
like you have to remake it, and they brought it out like 20 seconds later. I was like, there's no way you
Mm,
remade this, and I was
yeah.
like, did you remake it or did you pull the chips off? And then they're like try to be like, oh, we remade it, and the other waitress came over and she's like, we didn't remake it, and I was like, I can't eat it. I was like, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to like remake it for real. So I hope they remade it. I felt okay. So
Yeah. And
like,
the
but
speaking
it's
up
like it's
part
so like
sucks. Like it's
stressful,
hard.
right? Yeah, it's so
Stressful. Yeah.
stressful like having to communicate that, especially like in a foreign country when like people may not understand celiac
Mm,
disease as well. Like I feel like here in the US I got diagnosed in 2012, and where we're at now compared to where we were then, there's definitely
mm.
like a much better
Oh yeah.
understanding. More people are aware of it, more people are aware of ingredients, but like in the early days I was like they're like looking at me like I was insane, like ordering things the way I was ordering, you know.
Totally. Yeah, I was diagnosed about the same time. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing I have found is when eating out, a lot of times, like, and this happens to me too, but the individual with celiac, it's hard to even communicate your needs because you're like a little bit panicked inside because you're the one that's going to get sick and like you're the one that's going to have to eat these things. And it's like a little bit awkward.
Yep.
But it's a lot easier for somebody else to ask those things. Like
Mm-hmm.
my husband will ask, my friends, they'll no problem. Don't put gluten on her food. She's gonna get sick. You're gonna kill her. I'm not gonna die, but like they're gonna make it really clear. They have
Yeah.
no problem doing that.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm like, I'm already sweating. I'm a little bit nervous
Yeah.
in here. Like I already detected the menu. So that's
Yeah.
always helpful to have like an ally be the one
Absolutely.
communicating. Usually they're a little less fearless.
Yeah. I know it's
Yeah,
always like so hard to advocate for yourself, and
I know.
you don't want to like come off as like high maintenance or a pain in the neck, but like
Hmm.
you have to do this for your health in
Yeah.
order to like be healthy, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Especially
definitely
when something
a
comes out
challenge.
wrong again. That's when I'm like, ooh,
I know.
like I'm over it,
I'm
but
like, I'll
like
just
I don't
have
want to sit here and not
water.
eat. I know. Yeah. Can I have a glass of wine or something? I don't know. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk about fryers. So we just talked about that
Yep.
here briefly. So
Yeah.
people are, this is like another one I hear. I'm like, oh, I'm celiac, but I can eat foods out of a shared fryer. Is there any
Hmm.
instance where a celiac really is able to eat out of shared fryer, or are they just kind of pushing the limit of, wanting to be a little bit more normal and just
Yeah.
eat the French fries?
Yeah. You're pushing the limit. You might not have symptoms. Again, that doesn't mean that
Is
is
not doing
any
damage.
yeah, is doing any damage. With celiac, like it's like being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. Like you either have celiac or you're not. Whether you have a really terrible pregnancy with a lot of symptoms or you have no symptoms, either way, you're still pregnant. You still need to treat it the same. um, so with celiac, just because you don't have symptoms out of a shared fryer doesn't mean you can't avoid those. So anything, if if there's fries in there and onion rings, fries, or like chicken tenders is common, the amount of batter and stuff in that shared oils can be too much cross contact.
Yeah. But how amazing is it when a restaurant has a dedicated fryer?
We
The
love it.
best, right?
The best. Yeah, the
More
best.
restaurants, please have a gluten-free
I
fryer.
know. I know.
We
It would
definitely
it
need
would
that.
open up a lot of options for
I
people.
know, right? I know. Sometimes you look at a menu, you're like, great, I can only eat like 25% of this. Maybe. We'll
Yeah.
see. See once I
Maybe we'll
start
see the
asking
fryer
questions, right?
question mark. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And then toasters, people think that, they live in a household, they're the only one that's gluten-free, but the rest of their household isn't. Can they share a toaster, or you need to have separate toasters, and even like go as far as like separate cutting boards or anything that's kind of porous,
Yeah.
having your own like cutting boards, your own cookware, strainers for pasta, things like that? Or what's kind of the truth behind all that?
Protocol. Yeah. So toasters, yes. There is one study and it's very small. There's like 15 sample sizes. So I have not changed my recommendation yet because of this study. But the one study says it could potentially be safe. However, you can't really clean a toaster. It can't go in the dishwasher. You can't get in there and clean the grates. There's crumbs, like especially if it's been used frequently. So no, do not share a toaster. They do make toaster bags, which is like a little jacket basically for your toast that completely covers the gluten-free toast that then you could put in the toaster, and that would allow you to share it. Convection toasters, where like if you were to put a barrier, or not convection, what are the ones that like have a drawer?
Like air fryers, or no?
No,
Like a
toaster
like
ovens,
a
toaster ovens.
toaster oven. Yeah, like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
counter oven. Yeah.
Like a little old school. Those could be shared because you can put a barrier on the plate kind of thing, and they're just being toasted from above. So that could be shared. But there is a lot of misinformation about anything porous you can't share, right? So a lot of times people say that you can't share cutting boards, colanders because of the holes in it, Tupperware, wood products. All those things can be shared. As long as it has gone in the dishwasher and come out of the dishwasher, that's enough. Like it has been cleaned enough. If you don't have a dishwasher and hand washing things, that's fine. If you have a bowl that there was mac and cheese in there, do a good rinse, get all the mac and cheese residue off there with a clean sponge, wash the bowl, and then that would be safe. And that makes some people nervous because there's so much, like that narrative of you can't share cutting boards is huge because it gets in the grates. What I tell people is if you wash the cutting board, for example, right, and you scrub the cutting board clean, and gluten didn't come out when you scrubbed it, it didn't come out when you washed it in a hot dishwasher with soap and water, it's not going to come out on your bread. And certainly not enough to not be safe. We don't live in a gluten-free bubble. So even gluten-free products might have gluten in it. And we have there's research to show that less than 20 parts per million multiple times a day is safe. It's a very, very little amount, but a cutting board can be clean. I wouldn't share a cutting board if my husband were to make a sandwich, and then I'm not going to go and follow up with a gluten-free sandwich after that. It needs to be clean between, but it can be cleaned properly to reduce the gluten and make it safe.
And what about sharing sponges in the kitchen? Like, is that a form of cross contact that you can wash something with gluten and then wash your gluten-free stuff, and now all of a sudden you've glutened your safe cutting board?
Yeah, if you're hand washing it, yes. If it's going in the dishwasher and you're just using the sponge to like not make the dishwasher gross, you don't need to have separate things. It's going in the dishwasher anyways. But if you're hand washing something, that's why I said like if you have traditional mac and cheese, get it clean so that it looks like white or clear, whatever the color your bowl is, and then wash it with a clean gluten-free sponge.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're kind of doing a double wash there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I have one that I feel like I don't know what the right answer is on this one either. So looking for you to share your expertise here. So there's a lot of talk that, a lot of companies or like restaurants and stores and things like that are shifting to takeout containers that are made either from like wheat, things that might have gluten in them. So do we as celiacs need to be concerned if we're getting our takeout food in something that is made from wheat, or eating with like a wheat-based like straw or utensil and things like that? Is that a potential place that we can get gluten?
Good question. So I've actually worked with, or not worked with them, but been in talks with a dietitian that works for sustainable companies that make these products. And she's very familiar with celiac and gluten. And I was like, can I use these? Like, what is the process of it?
Mm-hmm.
And the stance from all those companies is the final product is gluten-free, because the part that they are using is the straw, which is
Mm-hmm.
not
The
where the gluten
starch.
is. Yeah. Not
Gotcha.
necessarily the starch, it's a different part of like the grain,
Plant. Okay.
the plant, and it's been processed enough. Have
Okay.
I seen the actual testing of it? No. But that is
Mm-hmm.
the official stance from four of the main companies. There's not a ton of companies that make those products, but
Mm-hmm.
the four main
Mm-hmm.
companies all state that the final product is gluten free.
Okay.
Also considering that we're not eating from them. Like, we are not eating the plate.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's yet to be said, like, of all, I wouldn't put all products that are like compostable or celiac safe, because they're coming out with new ones every single day.
Yeah.
But as what stands on the market currently, the stance from the manufacturers and the data that I have seen, it is gluten free and celiac safe.
Okay,
So don't
awesome.
eat it.
Because I was like, is that one more thing I have to worry about? I was like,
Yeah,
my
I wouldn't.
gosh. I was like,
Yeah,
bring back the plastic, even though I'm not a fan of plastic either,
I
right? But
know.
at least you know it's gluten free.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, the compostable ones, even from wheat, and most aren't because they are a lot more expensive.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are
So,
from corn. I've seen some from agave recently. So like those, I'm like, oh, I'm good with this. Like it's just the ones
yeah.
when like you see something with wheat and you're like, oh God,
Oh
you're
gosh,
like,
I
am
know.
I
You
gonna
see
get
the word and you're
sick?
like a little bit panicked. And I will say, I've had a lot of people and working with so many clients, if they think they're going to get sick, you're not going to feel great, right? The anxiety can cause a stomach ache. The anxiety can cause a headache. And so, if you don't have a clear understanding of what's safe and what isn't, that's a problem, because it's going to make you nervous and anxious when you're eating out. That's going to ruin your
Hmm.
experience anyways. And so you might
Hmm.
not even be getting gluten exposure, but you're not going to
Yeah,
feel good.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I've got two more that I want to debunk here. So
Okay.
this one, I think you're gonna love this one. People say that if you're celiac, you can take digestive enzymes or
Mm,
gluten enzymes and you can, eat a little bit more freely. So obviously these things might help someone with, gluten sensitivity, but they're
mhm.
certainly not going to be doing anything for someone with celiac disease. So can you break down how these work and what's going on and why these aren't safe for people to just take and eat whatever they want?
Yeah, I'll give it in a few different ways for people to think about, because I want this to stick. Number one, the mechanism is completely different. Somebody with celiac, your body is attacking itself. It's not that they can't break down gluten. The gluten is making your
Hmm.
body attack itself. The enzymes are just helping your body break it down. It can be broken down, but it's still in your system, and so your body's going to attack it as a foreign invader. The
Hmm.
second one is, if there was a supplement to treat celiac, basically, is what they're saying these enzymes do, don't you think manufacturers and pharma would capitalize on that?
Yep,
Like, there's been so
absolutely.
much research and studies to try and find these things, and we haven't found an answer and a
Hmm.
solution for celiac disease or solution to help with cross contact. If there
Hmm.
was, there would be a medication for it that some really smart person would be making a lot of money off of, and there
Hmm.
isn't. So some supplement is not going to help with celiac disease.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not a free ride to just eat whatever you
No.
want. So,
Yeah. No. But I will say this though. Kind of to my answer, my last question, it's not going to hurt. And so if it makes you feel better, like if you are somebody
hmm.
that's really anxious and you go to a restaurant and you're like, every time I eat, I get sick, and all I'm doing is ordering a glass of water and an apple. But if I
Hmm.
take these supplements, I help. The
Hmm.
placebo is effective.
Hmm.
It's a
You're
placebo
like, if you
effect.
want to spend the money on the placebo, then,
If you want to
go for
spend the
it.
money, if you think it works, take it. It's not going
Yeah.
to hurt, but don't take it and then order gluten, or don't take
Yeah.
it and then avoid cross contact.
Yeah.
But if you think it helps, and then it helps. So go
Yeah.
for it.
It's not going to
But it's
hurt
the
you. It's just
placebo
an
effect.
enzyme.
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Awesome. And then, all right. So the last one I want to debunk is cheating on and eating a little bit of gluten every now and then is fine.
Yeah. No. Here's why. Unfortunately, though, like, this myth is coming from doctors. Like, I've had worked
Yeah.
with a lot of clients where their doctors are like, "Well, on your birthday, have a piece of cake." Like, what?
No.
So I'm sorry for the people that were told that. No, you can never cheat. There is no like excuse or reason. Mistakes happen. Yes, that is completely different. But what is kind of crazy to me is people will think, well, I can eat a piece of pizza once a month, but then the rest of the month you're going to avoid cross contact. The amount of gluten in a pizza versus the little amount that you could be getting cross contact is completely like, there's thousands and thousands and thousands more times of gluten in a piece of pizza than there is in cross contact that you would ever get in. So if we're avoiding cross contact, we're certainly not going to go and eat a piece of pizza. That's
Hmm.
thousands of times worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no.
And then you don't know what damage it's doing too, right? Because it's like,
No.
okay, so when I get accidentally glutened, I've never willingly eaten gluten since I got diagnosed. I've
Right.
only been glutened by cross contact, but
Yeah.
I feel like awful for a week. I get horrible neurological issues.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like running at 30% capacity. I get really bad like occipital neuralgia and like headaches and joint aches and just feel miserable. So I'm like, why would I ever like eat gluten and do that? Like, who knows how miserable I would actually feel.
Mm-hmm.
But like for me, it's like it goes away in a week, but who knows how long my
A
intestine
year
is
would,
actually
yeah.
taking to
Yeah.
heal, right? Like some people say it can take like 3 months, 6 months for the each occurrence of gluten to do that. So if you're glutening yourself willingly once a month, like you're just constantly letting your intestine get damaged and never really healing, because even though
Yeah.
your symptoms might have gone away after a couple of days, you don't know how long it's going to take for that like atrophy of the villi to actually come back and grow and reset. And you know, down the road when you're eating gluten and you're celiac, that's going to lead to things like cancer and all sorts of
Yeah.
other chronic conditions later in life. So it's really something to take seriously.
Totally, yeah. And celiac, like I think what a big misunderstanding that I see really often too is that if you have celiac disease, you should have symptoms, right? Oh, if you have celiac, that's why I'm constipated. That's why I'm bloated. That's why I have headaches. That's why I don't have energy. I have celiac disease. Are you? And I would say, are you following gluten-free diet? Oh yeah, I'm really careful. I do all the right things. Great, then you shouldn't be having symptoms unless you're newly diagnosed and like
Yep.
you're
It
still
takes
healing in the
time.
process. It takes time. But if you're a year out and you're still having issues, we got to talk because either A, you're not actually gluten-free and you're doing something you don't you're unaware of, or B, there's something else going on because celiac disease is really a disease that has no symptoms unless you're newly diagnosed, you're eating gluten regularly, or there's something else. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for debunking all of these. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about your practice and some of your offerings as well. So you do coaching and then you also have an app. So tell us a little bit about that and how people can find you.
Yeah, so you can find us at the Celiac Space by Google or Instagram. We're also on TikTok. We work with our clients virtually one-on-one. We take insurance. So we're a team of 5 dietitians. We work with people with celiac, without celiac. And we work with a lot of pediatric clients, which is different. Most practitioners don't take pediatrics, and we definitely do because so many families struggle.
Yeah.
So anywhere in the US and Canada and really internationally, we work with clients. So for celiac, we also see a lot of those people that they're celiac, but they're still having symptoms. And so that's when we say, let me rule out all the gluten-free things and make sure you're doing that all properly. And then if you're still having symptoms, we're going to do a deep dive from kind of a functional medicine approach is how we work with our clients. So that's what we do. And then we also have an app, which is full of all of our resources and guides and support for people with celiac on the go. So things like what ingredients to look for, how do you read products, dining out resources, menus, those kind of things. And we have it's a secret feature that will be launching next month for Celiac Disease Awareness Month. That's going to be like a game changer for the community.
Nice.
So I'm just going to asterisk tease that.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we'll link to everything in the show notes too, so people can head over. So
cool.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Erin. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye.